one theme that we're very interested in this season is this idea of vertical integration. And when you look at a lot of the dexes in Ethereum or in crypto today, you're starting to see a little bit of that, right? Which is like Uniswap is a really good example of a protocol that started at the AMM layer, and they're kind of going up and down the stack, right, towards the distribution layer of having their own, UI, like desktop UI, and then their own wallet, and then down the stack to their own chain. You can look at like the recent competition between Pump Fun and Radium in Solana is another good example. Jupiter is the same thing. And so, I think especially like UI is super, super critical when it comes to exchanges, which is maybe what is the sort of driving force here. But, I'm curious on, on your thoughts in general on the idea of vertical integration when it comes to DEXs, whether or not, how Hyperliquid thinks about that, what areas of the stack are the most important for you to have direct control over. And then, you mentioned at the beginning of this episode that, or actually I heard you in, a 0x research episode that I was listening to before this, there's so many things that you need to get right. You need to design the right environment for traders, for market makers, but you also have to get the UI stuff right, which has been a real challenge in the perp space so far, obviously until, you guys have done a really good job on moving the ball forward there. But talk to me about how you think about vertical integration in general, and then UI, right? Like what is important to get right from a trader's perspective here?
Yeah. I think vertical integration is obviously super good as like a business decision. Like if you're just like a traditional company, you want to own as much of the stack as possible. I think it's like part of that is just like it's often unclear where the value accrues, but another part of that is just reducing the overhead of, like, if you have like many people you need to rely on to uphold their part of the deal, then your ultimate user experience is only as good as the weakest link in that chain. So, and I think that's also true in crypto, but I think there's a bit more tension in crypto, which is that sort of owning the full stack is also a bit antithetical to, I think, what DeFi should be. I think DeFi is more resilient if there are multiple possible choices at each layer of the stack. And so if any one of them is compromised or just goes down or like whatever, like loses, it starts going in the wrong direction and like stops prioritizing the right things, that like ultimately you can find some path through these so like different options at each step. You can like find some path that's like still pretty good. I think that like creates a much more robust financial system. So it kind of depends what you're optimizing for. From Hyperliquid's perspective, I don't think it's like a huge. Basically, like we never even seriously entertained the idea of building everything in finance, and so I think when the vision is that big, it's necessarily built by many people, and I'm very bullish personally on like coordination through protocols, not through like management. It's like you have like a 10,000 person company, you probably build all the finance if like everyone's super good and coordinated and whatever. But like I just feel like I just don't see that happening in the real world. And so like the next best thing is like 10,000 people coordinating across 1,000 companies, like each building their own pieces and like within a thoughtfully designed protocol to coordinate those efforts. And I think that's where I see Hyperliquid being. And I think it's just like the end state is so massively impactful, and just like there's just like it's just like such a valuable enterprise as a whole, like finance, that I don't think it matters if like Hyperliquid doesn't need to capture all of it. It's just, that's like a super greedy perspective. I think if you're like yeah, I'm doing this like one super small segment, then yeah, maybe you actually care about squeezing out every last bit of profit for your shareholders or whatever. But when you're building a protocol to power all the finance, I think the perspective is more like it's just like let's just like grow the pie. And if this thing is to succeed, like everyone's going to be like so happy that it doesn't matter.
There's maybe one area of like sort of vertical integration that we've seen across a lot of exchanges that I'd be curious for your take on, which is we've seen a lot of like centralized exchanges try to capture some of the economics from the stablecoin balances that are held on exchange. So Coinbase has this very lucrative distribution agreement with Circle, where they get a lot of the carry. Binance several different times has tried to either partner or kind of like white label their own stablecoin to capture some of that huge amount of like yield that's just latently being generated on all the stables that are on their exchange. And I think that's a really interesting angle because it's taking money that's completely outside of, it's not like taking from builders or users, it's just taking money from basically the US government and injecting it into your ecosystem. So I'm curious if like Hyperliquid has any, if you have any thoughts about, you know, how to capture some of this economic juice from all the USDC on chain on Hyperliquid, whether that's, you know, agreements with Circle or with Coinbase, or, you know, maybe even having another kind of white labeled stablecoin or something like that.
Yeah, it's not currently something we're working on. I think your question sort of highlights the point that there's just so much low hanging fruit that like it's kind of hard to believe, but you know, there are like billions of dollars like of stables sitting on Hyperliquid, but up until now, the priority has not been that. Like that has actually not been the low hanging fruit. Like, yeah, that's maybe like more than $100 million of yield at this point, but also the protocol makes annualized like about like 5 to 10x that. You know, I don't know the exact details. Like, not enough data points exactly to extrapolate a year, um, but I think you get my point, which is like there's just like so many things to do, and yeah, I think it'll be cool eventually for um, the protocol slash users to be able to have all sorts of benefits, right? And I think this is what happens when all of finance moves onto one chain. Is you get to kind of if that chain is designed thoughtfully and not greedily, like not as a sort of company maximizing extraction, but rather a company maximizing just cool shit that can be done, then yeah, I think all this stuff becomes possible.